God, give me chastity and continence, but not yet. These words, uttered by a young Augustine, reveal a man torn between his desires and his growing faith. It's a struggle many of us can relate to, even centuries later. His personal confessions, written over 1600 years ago, are still being read and studied today. But who was Augustine? Why does his story matter to us now? It doesn't take much to see the raw humanity in Augustine's life, the sin behind the saint. From his days as a party animal to his role as a theological heavyweight, Augustine's journey may challenge everything you thought you knew about saints and sinners. He was a brilliant young mind, full of potential, caught up in a whirlwind of excess and ambition. Born in North Africa to a pagan father and a devout Christian mother, he grew up straddling two worlds. But it was in Carthage where Augustine really let loose. Carthage was a hotbed of temptation, even for the wild late Roman Empire. Augustine jumped in with both feet, drinking, chasing women, even stealing for kicks. He threw himself into the city's wild side with an abandon that could even make party animals of today look tame. Augustine called Carthage his cauldron of illicit loves, and he was eager to try it all. Despite all the partying, Augustine did have a sharp mind. He had been a star student, especially when it came to public speaking. At 17, Augustine entered a relationship with a lower-class Carthaginian girl. Now, this was against his mother's wishes, which for some people may not mean much. But for Augustine, well, hard as it was to believe, through all of his experimentation, his mother was quite literally right there. His mother's name was Monica. In fact, thanks to Augustine's later writings about her life and her contributions to his life, she too was sanctified and became a saint. See, she would follow him into dark places and pray for him ceaselessly, matching his intellect in fiery debates with him and his friends. Augustine credits his mother, Saint Monica, with planting the seeds of faith throughout his life that would later blossom. But hold on, because we're not there yet. Augustine persisted with his on-and-off Carthaginian girlfriend for 15 years while taking on mistresses to boot. Regardless, she gave birth to his son, Adeodatus, and he only broke off the relationship for the last time shortly before he converted. As Augustine moved up in the world, teaching in Carthage and Rome, he felt torn. Part of him wanted wealth and fame, but another part felt empty inside. Looking back, he said with regret, "I loved my own undoing. I loved my error, not that for which I erred, but for the error itself." As he taught and wrestled with philosophy and theology, learning more about faith, he knew his wild days were coming to an end. But little did he know his real journey, his search for meaning, had only just begun. Despite his mother's persistent prayers and protestations, the heresy of Manichaeism caught his eye for almost 10 years with its idea that the universe is the stage for a spiritual battle of good versus evil and corrupt spiritual beings. It seemed to explain the conflict Augustine felt inside, splitting the world into light and dark. But as he dug deeper, the often simplistic answers just didn't cut it anymore. Meeting Faustus, a big name in Manichaeism, left Augustine feeling let down and looking for something else. Next up were the skeptics, who questioned everything. Augustine's sharp mind loved this approach, but it came with a downside. He quickly realized that always doubting left him feeling empty and lost. In Milan, Augustine met Bishop Ambrose, and there he saw a new side of Christianity, one that would fight fiercely in formal debate and campaign for the souls of sinners. Ambrose's powerful sermons and fresh takes on scripture opened Augustine's eyes. For example, Ambrose explained the spiritual and philosophical sides of the Old Testament, which resonated with Augustine's philosophical thinking. The bishop also had new ideas about free will and evil that Augustine had never heard before. When he embraced Neoplatonism, Augustine finally thought he had found the tools to really tackle big ideas about God, evil, and reality. It focused on the spiritual over the physical world, matching Augustine's growing feeling that true happiness wasn't found in earthly pleasures. As Augustine wrestled with all these ideas, it brought him closer and closer to Christianity, but just understanding it wasn't enough. He still felt unsettled. He later wrote, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you," showing how his deep thinking and his longing for something more pulled him in different directions. All this philosophical exploring set Augustine up for a big internal struggle. His mind and his heart were fighting over his soul, and things were about to come to a head in a small, unassuming garden in Milan. Sitting under a fig tree in Milan in 386 AD, Augustine, now 31, was in turmoil. This wasn't just another emotional day, it was when everything changed. Augustine was torn inside. He knows Christianity is true, but he can't seem to force himself to live it out. He wants to change, but feels stuck in his old ways. Suddenly, Augustine hears a child's voice from nearby. "Take up and read," it says. Augustine looked around and could see no one, but there was a book sitting near him. He picked it up and began to read. It was Paul's letter to the Romans. Immediately, his eyes landed on the words he knew were meant just for him. Let us behave decently, as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourself with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. In that moment, Augustine changed completely. He gave in to God fully. More than just agreeing with his mind, he submitted his heart and spirit to God's guidance, handing his past, his present, and his future to the Lord. Though his path had meandered before, this encounter in the garden was the true turning point in Augustine's life. For Augustine, it was God stepping into his life, breaking through his defenses and speaking to his very core. Right after his conversion, Augustine felt his long-suffering soul at peace, and rushed to celebrate with his mother the greatest realization he'd ever experienced, and it would put him on a path that would change Christian history. In these days of brain rot content and social media scrolling, we believe telling meaningful stories is one of the most important things you can do. That's why I'm delighted to be partnered with YouGrow Studios. YouGrow Studios is a unique, bespoke video production service that takes your video idea from vision to completion. With a team of expert scriptwriters, editors, thumbnail artists, and specialists, they turn your vision into reality in one simple package with low-cost subscription options. With the link in the description, you too can begin a new YouTube journey with a free video consultation to get you started and a free profile picture and channel banner when you sign up. To new growth this new year with YouGrow Studios. Augustine's Confessions changed the game for spirituality, literature, and understanding the human mind. But why would a respected bishop spill all his secrets? See, in the intervening time, Augustine had joined the church and his intellect had made him a bishop. There, he got brutally honest in a way that shocked the ancient world. He admitted to stealing, lusting, and straying from his faith, putting all his flaws out there for everyone to see. Confessions isn't just about shocking revelations, though. It goes deep into what makes us human, exploring sin and the search for God in a way that early church heavyweight had been doing for decades, but in the form of a New York Times bestseller. Augustine tackled questions we still struggle with today. Why do we keep doing things we know are wrong? What's driving our deepest desires? People connected with Augustine's honesty. Many, for the first time, saw a Christian who openly struggled with the same temptations they did. Also, the way Augustine wrote Confessions was just as groundbreaking as what he said. He wrote it as if he was talking directly to God, letting readers listen in on his most personal prayers. It's intimate and intense, like overhearing someone's deepest thoughts. Augustine's insights into how minds work were also way ahead of his time, and he put on paper for mass consumption what a lot of people had only previously mused late at night. Confessions still speaks to us today, too, because it's about stuff we all go through, struggling to be good and hoping for a second chance. We all know what it's like to want to do the right thing, but to mess up anyway. Augustine's honesty makes us feel like it's okay to face our own problems and to believe things can get better with the help of Jesus Christ. But Confessions was only the beginning. Augustine's brilliant mind and personal experiences penned papers that shaped the way Christians thought for centuries until today. His unique mix of philosophy, biblical interpretation, and life experiences meant his ideas came to dominate Western Christianity for over 1,000 years. Augustine changed how Christians viewed human nature and salvation through his concept of original sin. He laid the foundation and produced the biblical interpretation and theology for the idea that humanity was inherently fallen, a condition we inherited from Adam and Eve. This idea still shapes how many Christians see human nature and our relationship with God right now. His writings on divine grace also sparked debates that lasted for centuries. Augustine emphasized God's role in salvation, creating tension between God's control and humanity's free will. Thanks in part to his writing, this paradox is still a big question in Christian theology today. How much of our salvation is God's work and how much is our own choice? In City of God, Augustine presented a big picture view of history, showing earthly and heavenly realms in a cosmic struggle. His political and social ideas influenced political thought for generations, literally shaping the social contracts that formed in Europe after the fall of Rome. He molded how people saw the relationship should be between church and state. Augustine also tackled complex theological ideas like the Trinity, offering new ways to understand this divine mystery. His work set the stage for centuries of theological development and even greatly influenced later mystical traditions of Christianity. He became known as the Doctor of Grace, due to his work on the importance of God's grace and forgiveness, today a key part of any Christian theology. From the fall of Rome, the rise of feudalism, the Protestant Reformation, which claimed him as a champion, though paradoxically so did the Catholics, to modern evangelical movements, it's hard to find an area of Christian history that Augustine's ideas haven't touched. And so, it should be no surprise that his legacy is also one of significant modern relevance. Augustine's self-reflections actually helped lay the groundwork for modern psychology. Philosophers like Descartes and Kierkegaard were inspired by his exploration of self and consciousness. His thoughts on memory and time still matter in psychology today. For example, his idea of the inner self connects to current theories about self-awareness and metacognition. Unbelievably, Augustine's impact reaches into modern international relations too. Ever heard of just war theory? This was his concept of ethical requirements for conflict to be considered just. World leaders still use his ideas when talking about military action, dealing with the same moral questions Augustine wrestled with long ago. In fact, the UN's rules for humanitarian intervention actually look a lot like Augustine's just war principles. In writing, Augustine's Confessions, with his signature honesty and deep reflection, inadvertently kicks off the entire autobiography genre, which today is in the top 10 written genres worldwide. Meanwhile, today's debates about free will, fate, and evil often echo Augustine's ancient questions. His mix of deep thinking and personal experiences still resonates, finding footing in fields as diverse as neuroscience and psychology to politics and theology. Augustine's journey from sinner to saint challenges us to look at our own lives honestly. In this modern world, this idea of finding deeper meaning really hits home. Think about his famous quote, "Our hearts were made for you, O Lord, and they are restless until they rest in you." In the meantime, check out this video we did on the most powerful creative force in the universe, the most dangerous word in the English language. As for St. Augustine, his diligent pursuit of truth, love, and meaning, influencing all of history, truly establishes his place in God's holy histories.